All right, so the final meal of the course. I'm really excited that you're here. So I'd really like you to watch this entirely, and then next time I want you to go back and do this recipe with me and follow along. So you might ask, why spaghetti and meatballs? I think it's a great recipe that kind of incorporates everything in this course. We're talking about food preparation. We have to do it a couple different times. We're gonna saute in a frying pan. We're gonna bake in the oven, and then we're going to incorporate it all together. So that's why I did spaghetti and meatballs. So throughout this demonstration, I'm also going to talk about some alternatives that you might want to consider when you're making spaghetti and meatballs. Another great part of this recipe is a lot of this stuff you'll probably have on hand. So it's kind of like a go-to that you can make that's really simple. It might look like a lot, but it's really simple once you put it all together. All right, so let's cover a couple things that we've already kind of talked about. Food safety, right? Here's my meat. I've already prepared it. I put it in this container. It's still cold. It's just out of the fridge, but it's separated from everything else, right? So here's my meat, separated. Also around here, I have everything set up. So here's my cutting board ready to go. All my ingredients for this first step, which is making the actual meatball, they're all here. All my ingredients are here. A real benefit of this too is once I incorporate into this meat and like that cross-contamination part, I'm in the raw meat now, I already have all my ingredients. So if I'm touching stuff and moving it, it doesn't really matter because all of this is going to get washed. So let's dive right in. If you got any rings on, take them off because the meatballs get kind of messy. So first I have my meat here. A couple more ingredients that I need to prepare is I need some onion. Now guys, this recipe, I'm not going to go cover the exact measurements as we go here. You can find that recipe down below, but I encourage you to also make some little changes as we go too. So half of the onions for the sauce and the other half for the meatball. So we're going to cut that root end off like we've always talked about. Pull the skin layer off. Now it's really important when you're cutting an onion for the meatballs is that it's very finely chopped because you don't really want to get a huge chunk of onion in your meatball. Unless you really love onions. So we're going to go for a really fine dice, which we already covered before. So this onion was kind of big, so I'm just going to use about that much. As you can see, it's so finely diced. And then I can save this part, and I'll put this also in the sauce. You'll start to be able to judge things better as you cook and be like, whoa, that onion was so big, I really don't need that much. You might be wondering what the ice cream scoop for. That's for something later, you'll see. All right, the only other thing I don't have prepped is some cheese. So Parmigiano Reggiano, any cheese by that matter, you don't want to buy it grated. Like you can get this in that grated container. I used to have it as a kid. It doesn't even taste even close to the same. And it won't have that, it has cellulose actually in those. So get yourself the grater we talked about in the equipment section. Gonna do like, not the tiniest hole, but the next step up. And I think I want about like a 1/4 cup of this. Another good cheese for this would be, I think it's called Pecorino. It's actually from sheep milk. But this Parmigiano Reggiano actually comes from some part of Italy, and you can only market it as that cheese if it's from a certain region. And you could tell because it has a stamp on it. Yeah, so if you go to cheese and it says from Wisconsin, it's not the Parmigiano Reggiano that you see here. Got to be careful here though when you use this. It has a lot of salt to it, so be careful with salting the rest of your food. Hey, another great tool that if you have one of these, it's like a dough scraper. Awesome tool, and I'll show you why. So here we got that 3 pounds of ground beef. One thing you could substitute here is put in a pound of ground pork if you want an extra tender meatball. So I'm gonna throw the onion in there. See how awesome this tool is for that? Super simple. Go ahead and add the cheese in there. Everything's going in here. That's what's so easy about spaghetti and meatballs, or making meatballs in general. Guys, you could use this recipe of meatballs for, say, a meatball sub, or you just want to eat meatballs too. All right. Now I'm thinking cross-contamination, right? So the eggs, I'm going to do that last. I can wash my hands. So here we got breadcrumbs. Those are going in. All right. In here I got the granulated garlic and Italian seasoning. That bang with the Italian seasoning, it already has everything all in one seasoning. So just buy the Italian. Get that in there. And that garlic, granulated garlic that I added in that same container, that it's garlic granules. Super hard to find. I can never find it. And when you do find it, especially if you can get it organic, keep it. It's just better than the powder. Powder's so fine. This is a great way to go. Then we got milk. See, everything's pre-measured, ready to go. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to worry about my hands dirty and cross-contamination as I go. So guys, I'm talking about those things like that because I just want you to really grasp that in this course. Eggs, 2 eggs. So this is it, my last ingredient besides salt and pepper, and I like to do that at the end. So we're gonna put 2 eggs in there. Now guys, when you're mixing meatballs, there's really no good way to do it except with your hands, all right? So now we're really getting involved in our food. I'm gonna wash my hands real quick. All right, now my hands are clean. They're going into the food that I'm gonna eat. Get my work area kind of cleaned up here. The more you organize it as you go, the easier it is. All right, now time to make the meatballs, right? So grab yourself a container that you're gonna put them in until the actual cooking process. Sheet pans work good, anything flat. Plates can tend to be too small with all the meatballs. You know what I could have done is prepared the onion before for that sauce. But anyway. Actually, before I dive in there, I'm actually gonna add my ground pepper. I like to freshly crack it. And then a couple pinches of salt. You got to be careful with the salt, but we got 3 pounds of hamburger in here. But that, like I said, that Parmesan will be pretty strong. All right, that's everything in there for the meatballs. Now you got to get your hands dirty. The real important part is you're trying to incorporate it all. You want to get every little bit into every little bit so it's all fully incorporated. Once you hit that, you're good. A few different things too. If it's too dry, like they're falling apart, you can add a little more milk, but be careful, add a tiny bit at a time to get there. If it's too wet, you can add breadcrumbs, same thing, add a little bit at a time to get there. So go ahead, I mean, there's no pretty way to do this. Make sure you get it all incorporated. Make sure you got a big bowl. One thing you can add too to make your meatballs a little bit lighter and softer is add a slice of bread in there, like white bread. And one way to get that so it's like smaller pieces, you just use it out of the freezer. So you can chop it fine out of the freezer, or you can actually take a piece of white bread that's frozen and use it on your cheese grater on the heavy section, and it will kind of make a breadcrumb. All right, that's fully incorporated. As you can see, it's sticking really good. That binder, the egg and the cheese. I'm really not going to have to add anything. You can kind of see it's all sticking together with one mat. When it comes to the hamburger, I think this is 85% lean. The more fat, the more greasy your meatball might be, but it might have a little more flavor. All right, so the secret weapon, the ice cream scoop, and you might ask why. It's just because it gives you the same portion every time. So consistency. The meatballs will cook the same, everything will be the same. If you go try to saute meatballs different sizes and then bake them like we're gonna, then it'll be inconsistent. So it gives you one consistent. Find something you can measure like that to make them all the same. It'll be a huge advantage for you. So this is the rolling part, super simple. I use a scoop until it's flat. And that's one meatball. And then you're just gonna roll it. One way to look at doing it is cup your hand like this. And kind of push a little bit as you do it. As you do that, it kind of pushes it together and keeps it round. And then if you lighten it up and just roll on your hand, it should give you like a perfectly shaped meatball and no cracks. Those cracks are what makes it fall apart. And you lose the cracks when you push it like this. And there's one. I just put it in the sheet because it's easy to grab. If you're making a ton of these, set up the sheet and put it in your fridge until you're ready to start sauteing them. All right, so round two, we got all those meatballs prepared. I got them in the refrigerator. If you get a chance to refrigerate them, it's always a good idea. It kind of holds them better for the next process. So what I'm doing now is I'm gonna fry them, okay? We wanna get that pan nice and hot. So I got 2 steps to cooking these meatballs. You wanna get a frying pan nice and hot. And you put some water in there, and if you see the beads, the water roll around like a bead, then we know we're ready for oil. Then we're gonna add some olive oil. Extra virgin. I use this because it's got a good smoke point. It doesn't smoke at a low heat. We want enough to cover the bottom, but I like to go a little bit extra when I'm doing meatballs. Kind of helps them from sticking. Now guys, this step of the process, what we're doing is we're building flavor, right? In this pan. This is the beginning. Sorry, a little bit of water came off my hands. We're gonna brown the meatballs, and that's gonna build the flavor. This is a 2-step process. The other part is we're gonna bake them. So you're probably like, why are we frying them and baking them? If you try to fry the full meatball in a pan and you're gonna try to brown it, you're probably gonna overcook it and you're gonna burn the outside of that meatball to give it enough time to come up to temperature within the meatball, if that makes sense. So the only goal here is to brown that meatball, and then we're gonna bake it the rest of the way. All right, so we know our oil's good. It's moving around nice and easy in that pan. So we can start adding our meatballs. Now when we talk about browning meat, we're putting them in one place and not moving them yet. This is gonna help them brown. As you can see, I can even move them there and they're stuck. That meat is sticking to the bottom of that pan. Now it's important when you do this, you're not overcrowding the meatballs. That's good. What you're gonna do is let them brown on that side. Watch your temperature. If you start to see smoke, your oil's too hot, you're burning your oil. If it's not sizzling, you're not hot enough that you're actually gonna brown. So right here is just about right. If you have a fan and you're above your stovetop, it's a good time to use that now. During this process too, you can refrigerate the other meatballs if it's gonna take you a long time. There's no real rush here, but you gotta have it hot enough that you brown them. Now if you try to move them and they still stick, then they're just not ready to flip. See, that one went. And as you can see, the bottom's brown. Perfect, that's just what we're looking for. So go ahead, the one in this middle sticks a lot harder. Go ahead and start turning them. We're really looking to brown them on all 4 sides. This isn't really working well. I'm going to use my flat spatula. This little fish dude gets under everything. Perfect little brown. And the beauty of this browning is it gives it a little bit of crunch. This is a simple process. You're just going to go through all those meatballs like this. Remember what we learned in the previous video. If it's getting too hot, you go ahead and lift it off. If you're at a stovetop with a burner, you just put it beside. But have it ready. So these guys are good for me. They're good to go. They all got a nice brown on them. So I'm going to pull these off and put them on a baking sheet. As you keep going with this pan, if you get some pieces of meat in there that were kind of almost stuck to the bottom, we could see this here in this corner. You can pull those off and add those to your sauce later. It's delicious. If you leave them in the pan, they're just going to burn. So those brown bits are flavor. So get them out of that pan now. Guys, a lot of times it's not a good idea to use metal in these frying pans like that. I know this one doesn't scrape the bottom. You could always use a wood spatula. One like this is really nice because it kind of has a scoop too, and that wood ain't going to affect the bottom. But the more batches you do too, the bottom is going to start to brown. These are going to brown a lot quicker than the other ones because that pan's already really nice and hot, okay? So go ahead and move them if they're going to move, like that. And then once you're done and have a full sheet, go ahead and bake them at 350 until that internal temperature is around the 160 mark. You're good to go. If you're going to simmer this a long time in the sauce, you could even go a lot less, like 145 say. Put them in the sauce and then they'll finish cooking in the sauce. Ultimately, you could, if you were making a sauce, like an all-day sauce, you could skip this baking part and actually cook them in the sauce. Just be very careful if you're going to do that to make sure it's going long enough that they get to that internal temperature of 165. All right, so now we're going to make the sauce, right? But this is evaluation time. You got to look at your pan. If there are bits in there are way too black and burnt, you don't want to have that in your sauce. If it's just at this level after your meatballs where it's brown on there, we want to save this, right? This is going to incorporate flavor. So like again, I got everything out of the way and now I'm here for round 2 for the sauce. The meatballs are baking at the moment. So what we're going to do is take onion. We're going to saute that onion. Do I add oil to the pan? No, I don't. We've added all that oil from when we were making the meatballs, so we don't need to add any more. The moisture in these onions is going to help deglaze a little bit at the bottom of that pan. So like we did before, we're just sauteing, okay? Keep them moving. You can already see that bits on the bottom are coming off. If you start burning that bottom, you have to just be really careful at this point, all right? Making sure you don't burn. Then I like to add some of my tomato paste because I want to brown this. When I brown anything and everything, like we've talked about through this whole course, it's adding flavor. That's even when you're cooking tomato paste, okay? But tomato paste, you got to be very careful because it's going to want to burn. Now that that's kind of browning, I'm just going to add my garlic in this corner so it can start to cook up. Because in a minute, we're just going to deglaze everything. Now guys, if you had a pan that was just so far gone, it was like burned and black, or you're not a fan of cooking in that oil now, all that oil and deliciousness that the pan created, then all you got to do is saute your onions in another pan and then add that tomato paste. All right, guys. If you're using these, I'm using about 2 cans worth of water. So that tomato paste, I already have it in a cup here. And the good part of this, if your pan's hot enough, it should just deglaze that bottom. It wasn't getting hot enough. So I'll bring it back up. All right, that's a little bit hotter. You can see there, it's almost like boiling. But that water is just deglazing the bottom of the pan. So as you can see, now there's like nothing on that bottom, right? So now we've incorporated all the flavor that was in this pan, from the onions to the garlic to the browning of that beef, cooking in that olive oil. It's now in all of our sauce. There's nothing on the bottom of this pan. Now, depending on your size of your frying pan, you might not be able to go any further than this. If you can't, you're just going to put this in a bigger pan, okay? But now that we've got all the flavor off the bottom, other than just pulling off our meatballs and starting fresh, now we still have everything incorporated, and you could transfer this to a bigger pan. But I'm just going to finish the sauce here, and then before I add my meatballs later, I'm going to put it in a bigger pot. So now I'm going to add the rest of my water that I had. Not the water I was drinking, but this one. Okay, that helps balance all that tomato paste. And then we got tomato sauce. And then I got 1 big can of crushed. Careful, this one will splatter everywhere. We don't want to forget those bits from the meatballs that we're going to cook too far. Add that in there. That's going to be a treat for someone that gets that in their spaghetti. All right. And now we're just going to incorporate it all. And you're going to bring it up to a simmer. You could cheat, get it up to a boil, and then check it, or just get to simmer. But if you have it on a high heat, be careful, because you could burn the bottom. All right, guys, so what are we missing now, right? So we got the fat from the olive oil and the hamburger. We got the heat from the browning of the meatballs. There's something we're missing in this sauce. Can you tell me? Yep, it's definitely, whoop. It's a little bit too hot. See how I stopped that instantly? Gonna turn that down. If I stirred that, I won't do that. These little burners are confusing anyway. All right, so the one thing we are missing is salt, okay? You want to add large pinches of salt to this. Going to use a kosher salt. These. All right, add that and then give it a good stir, incorporate it. Now, one thing, it's up to you. Like, I don't cook with it much, but sometimes with a sauce, I like to add a little bit of sugar, because it just helps balance all that acid that's in the tomato. But you do you, like test it how you like it. If you don't like it, then don't add it. So I'm not gonna add much. I got some sugar here. I get the cane sugar, organic if you can, and not even much. I do about that much for all of this. And then to finish this off, we're gonna add some freshly cracked pepper. Give it another stir. And don't forget a little Italian seasoning. Not only is it good for presentation, but it gives a good taste. Add that now, because if you add it earlier in any of those other stages, you could burn it. That's it, guys. Now you can let this simmer. This is a semi-thicker sauce, so you can't go too long with it or it's just going to get really pasty for your spaghetti, but it's not going to be runny either. So you can let it simmer, cover it. You obviously keep that moisture in, and then you'll be able to add the meatballs for a little bit. All right, so let's go ahead and check those meatballs. They look like they're perfect. Super important to have a thermometer. We're looking for 1. Yeah, these went definitely. Cooked a little long. I should have checked them earlier. But incorporating them in the sauce, they're just going to be super tender anyway. I had to go a different pot, so I went in with a bigger pot here. And then I'm going to actually throw it on the burner back here. Just because of the size, it's just a lot bigger pot than that little burner. So go ahead and take your meatballs and add them to that sauce. You can see how thick that sauce is, and it just covers them really well. Now, I don't do anything with this liquid that's in the bottom of that. Build in flavor, but that's mostly moisture that's come off into this little pan. And we don't need to put it in this sauce. Go ahead and give it a good stir. And then I like to simmer this for 20, 30 minutes. Can go longer than that if you have a cover so it doesn't get too thin, but you can see how well that incorporates. Meatballs have a good structure. They're not falling apart, but I'm sure they're really tender. And at this point, after I've gotten everything in there, I like to taste that sauce, and I want to know where I'm at, because I need to know if I need more salt. You could use a little more salt. So go ahead and pinch it. And what you could do is put this in, go ahead and stir it again, and then test it again. Now go ahead and put this on your stove top, cook it very low, light simmer, and then we're going to cook the spaghetti. All right, so the final cooking step in this process is we're going to make the spaghetti. I did a whole nother section on cooking pasta. I hope you checked out that part. But what we're going to do is this is a 4-quart pan. We just bring 4 quarts pan, and I filled it about halfway with water. I know this is just enough to do a whole package of spaghetti. So you're going to get that ripping boiling, and then I add my salt. You got to salt that water for this pasta. Really important. I do 4 good pinches of salt. And just make sure it's mixed and not sitting on that bottom so it doesn't etch your pan, which means like make a little pit in your pan. I let that get back up to boiling. So for spaghetti, I take the whole pile. And then I break it in half. It's just easier to cook it in the pan. So right in the middle, I break it and right into the pot. Now the important part is to prevent that from sticking to itself. So I like to use tongs for this. When I break that in half, they fit really nicely in here. You can cook full long spaghetti if you'd like. Just make sure you move it around in there. Prevent a clump like that getting stuck together in one piece. Now we don't have to aggressively boil it as much. You can turn that water down. You just want to make sure it's at least simmering. And then we're going to let it go until it's al dente, which is not crunchy, but it's not soft also. Be really careful about putting a lid on this. If you put a lid on this, there's a good chance you could boil it over, and it's just a big mess. So as long as you got a rumbling little boil in there, it's fine to leave the lid off. As you can see, it's like filled the pan. There's a lot less water, and you're just seeing pasta. I can tell it just needs another minute or so. But now you can see that they're not stuck together. They're all loose, which is super important. And to test it, all you do is grab one of those and try it. Just remember, it's super hot right there. Almost. So it's almost a little bit chewy. The crunchy is gone. It's not mush, and it's not super sticky. So it's really close. All right, so that was a few more minutes. Now let's do the ultimate test. Grab one of those skitties. All right, couple more minutes. Like at the end here, it's gonna get really fast, quick, where it's done. Go ahead, grab one, check it. Like, there it is. It's not mush. It's not crunchy. It's perfect. Now you want to shut off your heat. And then you want to strain that water out as quickly as possible. There we go. Perfectly cooked. Now, if you're not going to use it right away, make sure you add a little bit of oil. If you're going to serve it right now, then go ahead and serve it nice and hot. The final step, trying out this spaghetti and meatball recipe. So go ahead and grab your pasta. This has been on the stove a little bit, so I didn't mix enough with oil. Maybe a little bit stuck, but it looks almost perfect. And now for the star of the show, the meatballs. My favorite part. Give it a good stir. Perfectly sized. Little sauce for the top. You can see those onions in there. Little chunks of garlic. And the crushed sauce. Kind of adds a little more texture. So any pasta like this, definitely want some freshly grated Parmigiano Reggiano. All right, let's jump into these. Meatballs super moist, got some sauce there. Give it a try. Man, that is good. That's a success. So guys, if we do a recap of this meal, right, the whole goal of the spaghetti and meatballs was to encapsulate everything that you learned in this course, right? We talked about cross-contamination, keeping the beef out of the rest of the food. We talked about preparing, getting everything ready. We did it at every step. We did it the initial prep. We did it when we made the meatballs. We did it when we cooked the meatballs and baked them. And even at this final step, right, I'm going to serve it and everything else is gone and ready to serve. Super important. So guys, I encourage you to go back in the course and do those other sections and work on them and work on them. The more you practice this, the better you'll be at home cook. And then a big key to this was building the flavor, right? We built it in that frying pan. So we had the oil and then we cooked up sauteed those meatballs in there. We browned them up. The little brown bits got stuck at the bottom of the pan, mixed with that olive oil. And then we kept incorporating it. And then we put the onions and garlic, and we cooked a little bit of that tomato paste in there. That just built a ton of flavor that's in the sauce now in this recipe. Super important. Go back to that part in the course where we talked about flavor and really practice, building flavor like we did with those mushrooms, but use it with any vegetable or any protein like beef or chicken. Just follow those steps to build flavor. You keep doing that, it'll be a game changer for your home cooking. So guys, I want to thank you for taking my course. I'm really excited that this might change the game for your home cooking. I think it's so important to cook at home. You could stop eating all those processed foods or prepared foods and start focusing on cooking, and it'll be a game changer for you and maybe your family. And again, I want to thank you for your support.